Welcome to the Midrash Parasha. This week, we will be learning the Midrash Parasha, Korach. I hope this channel will open your mind to the great teachings of the sages and deepen your connection to the Torah. Remember to like, share, and subscribe as we journey through the Midrash each week. Before we begin, we invite you to settle in for the drive or sit in your comfortable chair. Turn on the closed captions and relax as you listen to what the Midrash says. Out loud. Korach resents that he was not selected for a high office. Korach ben Yitzhar, a man from the tribe of Levi, was deeply offended that Moshe had not assigned him a prominent communal position. Korach thought, "My mazal, destiny, indicates that I was born for greatness. For what reason did my grandfather name my father Yitzhar oil? Grandfather must have foreseen that just as oil always floats to the surface, so too would father produce superior sons deserving of anointment with the sacred Shemin Hamishcha for positions of kahuna or royalty. Now, who is meant if not I, the oldest of Yitzhar's sons and the one most qualified for high office?" Indeed, Korach combined superior qualities which few people could equal. First, his ancestry was illustrious. His forebear was Kehas, and his family, the children of Kehas, was the most important of the Levite families. Korach was a first cousin of Moshe and Aharon. He had been chosen as one of the carriers of the Aharon. Moreover, Korach was a very intelligent and learned man. He foresaw with Ruach HaKodesh that his descendants would include the famous prophet Shmuel, as well as 14 groups of Levites who would prophesy with Ruach HaKodesh. Said Korach, "I am destined to be the source of all this greatness. How can it be that I myself should not achieve rank of special importance?" Foreknowledge of his great progeny strengthened his belief in the successful outcome of a revolt against Moshe. He did not realize that he would be destroyed, and that his surviving sons would bear these great descendants. Above all, Korach was self-assured because of his fabulous wealth. He thought himself favored by Hashem, and therefore entitled to contend against Moshe. For a rich man speaks with impudence, Mishlai 18:23. How did Korach become rich? The other members of the tribe of Levi lived in poverty. They had carried away no gold or silver from Egypt. Moshe's command that every Jew take money and vessels from the Egyptians referred only to those tribes who had performed slave labor. Since the Levites had not labored for the Egyptians, but were free and studied Torah, they received no money in recompense at the Exodus. At the Yam Suf, the Levites refrained from taking the spoils of Egypt because they attached no value to worldly possessions. They were totally immersed in Torah study. Throughout the years of the wilderness, the Levites lived without means, dedicating themselves purely to spiritual concerns. Only Korach was money-hungry. In Egypt, he had been a treasurer for Pharaoh. He had hoped that the Jews would remain in Egypt after the redemption, and he would then become the owner of the royal treasure. Hashem, who leads each person in life along the path he wishes to be led, satisfied Korach's craving for money by letting him discover a part of the treasure that Yosef had concealed in the royal coffers. This discovery made Korach one of the wealthiest people who ever lived. However, since he misused his wealth to rebel against the Torah, he was punished midah keneged midah. No trace of his fortune remained. It disappeared together with him, in the ground. Despite his many distinctions, Korach would not have dared to oppose Moshe had it not been for his wife. Korach's wife inflated her husband's ego and repeatedly assured him that he was on a par with Moshe and Aharon. To his misfortune, Korach listened to his wife. There were two extremely wealthy people, one Jew and one Gentile, who listened to their wives, were destroyed, and lost their fortunes. The Jew was Korach, whose wife inspired him to rebel against Moshe. The non-Jew was Haman, who listened to his wife to erect a gallows 50 amos high for Mordecai. Little did he realize that he was preparing the gallows for himself. Korach's pride was deeply wounded because Moshe had apparently ignored him when he selected the various dignitaries. He had not appointed Korach for any outstanding function in the community. "It is utterly unfair," the mortified Korach thought, "that Moshe did not choose me as Nasi over the family of Kehas. It was clearly my right to be chosen." I am the firstborn of the second of Kehas's sons, Yitzhar. Instead, he conferred this office upon my younger cousin, Elitzaphan ben Uziel, Bamidbar 330. My grandfather Kehas had 4 sons, Amram, Yitzhar, Chevron, and Uziel. Amram's 2 sons, Moshe and Aharon, became respectively a king and a high priest. Amram's grandson Eleazar was made a Kohain, while I was not, although I am certainly at least his equal. Korach calculated that even the numerical value of his name, MP, was the same as the numerical value of Eleazar, 308. Why should Eleazar have been made a Kohain when I was not? I cannot believe that Hashem commanded Moshe to distribute the offices so unjustly. Rather, Moshe must have done so by his own choice. Who says that each of his acts is dictated by Hashem, as he asserts? Korach, a wise man, lost his wisdom and reason because he was consumed with desire for glory and by envy of those who, as he saw it, were his equals and had attained higher ranks than he. His declaration that Moshe had distributed the offices without a divine commandment was apicorsis. Korach thus caused himself to be classified as one of those who scorn Hashem's word. Eventually, Korach went so far as to assert that Moshe had invented all the mitzvot. Korach's envy burned in his heart for a long time. It was the subject of many conversations between him and his wife. One of these took place when he returned from the purification ceremony of the Levites, Bamidbar, 8:5-14, shaven bald to the point of being unrecognizable. Korach's wife exclaimed, "I didn't recognize you. Who disfigured you so?" "This was Moshe's doing," replied Korach. "More than that, first Moshe and then Aharon lifted me and waved me up and down. What a disgrace. Then Moshe told me that now I am pure because I underwent the purification process of the Levites." Korach mocked the purification ceremony since he knew that he had not become purer, but on the contrary, felt an intensified desire to rebel against and blaspheme the mitzvot. In reality, Torah and mitzvot are an elixir for those who wish to purify themselves, but poison for those who seek to defile themselves. Korach's wife: "Ridiculous. You see how Moshe hates you? He contrived the idea of shaving you in order to make you look ridiculous." Korach: "You cannot say so, because Moshe afterwards did the same to his own sons." Korach's wife: "What does he care as long as he can degrade you?" Thereafter, Korach incited the people against Moshe and gained a few followers. However, he did not dare to challenge Moshe openly. The entire people admired Moshe and would have slain Korach for suggesting a rebellion against their beloved leader. Now, in the second year in the wilderness after the incident of the spies, Korach felt that the time was ripe for rebellion. Many deaths had occurred. Jews had died in Tavera and in Kivros Hata'ava. Above all, the people were depressed because all the men who had gone out of Egypt would perish in the wilderness. Moshe had been unable to prevent this decree with his tefillah, and his former popularity had waned. Many Jews thought in their hearts that under Moshe's leadership, they had suffered many misfortunes. Korach believed that he could now gain followers. One day, when he returned from the Beit HaMidrash, his wife inspired him with an idea for starting an argument with Moshe. Korach's wife: "Which halasha did Moshe teach you today in the Beit HaMidrash?" Korach: "He taught us the laws of tzitzit, wearing knotted strings, of which one is tekailet." Korach's wife: "What is this tekailet?" Korach: "Moshe said, attach strings to your garments, of which one must be of blue wool, dyed with the blood of the creature chilazon." Korach's wife: "See what silly laws he teaches you. Why should you have only one tekailet string attached to your garment? I can make you a garment that is completely tekailet." This provided Korach with an idea for opposing Moshe. Korach campaigns to win followers. Korach knew that he had no hope of success if it were known that he aimed at obtaining a position for himself. He therefore decided to form a party against Moshe, Leshaim Shamayim. It proclaimed that every Jew should have an equal opportunity to serve in the Mishkan. Korach began to agitate the people by bringing to their attention that most positions in the Mishkan were occupied by Moshe's own family, as were the other high positions in the community. To his own relatives, Korach said, "Why has Moshe made you only Levites and not Kohanim? He appointed you merely as assistants for his brother Aharon and his sons." To the firstborn of all the tribes he said, "By what right did Moshe declare, 'You unfit for the avoda,' and put the Levites in your place?" His neighbors, the members of Reuven, he addressed as follows. Reuven was the firstborn of Yaakov's sons. "Look how Ben Amram slighted you when the altar was inaugurated. He did not let your Nasi offer his korbanos first, but chose the Nasi of Yehuda, Nachshon ben Aminadav, to bring sacrifices on the first day. Do you know why? Because his brother Aharon married Nachshon's sister Elisheva. For this reason, Moshe appointed Nachshon as the head of the Degalim and summoned him to offer sacrifices first." Korach was envious of Nachshon's position too. In reality, Nachshon was chosen because Yehuda was divinely selected as the leading tribe. Children of Reuven, why do you tolerate that Moshe gave the kahuna to Aharon? Heretofore, the firstborn used to offer sacrifices. Moshe acted according to Hashem's commandment, was the reply to Korach's instigations. "Impossible," declared Korach. "Moshe himself decided how to distribute the positions of distinction. What makes you think that only Aharon deserves the position of priesthood? You are all great enough to be Kohanim, for weren't we told by Hashem, 'And you shall be to me a kingdom of Kohanim and a holy people'? Shemos 19:6. Now, if you reply that the firstborn lost the privilege of serving in the Mishkan after the sin of the golden calf, then Aharon should not have become a Kohen either, for he too participated in that sin. There ought to be equal rights for all who are worthy of high positions. Incidentally, I myself would qualify for the kahuna better than Aharon because I am a firstborn and I did not sin in the Chait HaEgel." In order to secure followers, Korach invited the public to a lavish banquet at which much wine was poured. As they were feasting, Eleazar ben Aharon appeared to collect from the slaughtered animals the parts due to the Kohanim. Korach took the opportunity to display his brilliant and evil wit, and sarcastically told the assembly the following anecdote. There was once a poor widow with 2 daughters, who possessed a single field. When she wanted to plow it, Moshe warned her, "Do not harness an ox and a donkey together." When she was about to plant seeds, Moshe told her, "Do not sow 2 species in your field." When harvest time arrived and she cut the grain, Moshe commanded, "Leave over leket, shikcha, and paya, the harvest gifts that are separated from the crops." After she collected the wheat, he cautioned her, "Separate the dues of teruma, ma'aser rishon, and ma'aser shaini." The poor widow decided that it did not pay for her to keep her field. She sold it and bought 2 sheep. She planned to use their wool for warm clothing and to slaughter their young. When the ewe gave birth, Aharon appeared and ordered her, "Give me the firstborn. Hashem said it is mine." When she sheared the sheep, Aharon came again, telling her, "The first of the shearing belongs to me." "How much more will this man demand?" thought the widow. "Let me slaughter my sheep and eat them." As soon as the sheep were slaughtered, there was Aharon again, claiming his right to the shoulder, jaws, and stomach. "You are insatiable," said the widow. "I prefer to donate the sheep as a cherem to Hashem." "Perfect," cried Aharon jubilantly. "Now they are altogether mine, for Hashem commanded, 'Every cherem belongs to the Kohanim.'" Aharon took away everything, leaving the poor widow and her 2 daughters weeping. "You see," concluded Korach, "whatever Moshe and Aharon preach is for their own benefit. They rob you and assert that Hashem commanded them to do so." With this and similar pieces of oratory, Korach gained 250 followers. He cloaked them in garments of tekailet that had been made at his order, and they all appeared before Moshe. Korach assembles his followers and argues against Moshe. The faction that appeared to argue with Moshe was not a unified one with a single claim. Rather, Korach and his followers disagreed among themselves about the purpose of their argument. Basically, there were 3 types of claimants. Korach himself disputed Aharon's divine election for the kahuna. He claimed that Moshe had assigned the kahuna to Aharon and the avoda to the Levites of his own accord. Korach demanded that the right to perform the avoda be restored to the firstborn of all the tribes, rather than being limited to the tribe of Levi alone. Korach was joined by an independent group consisting of Datan and Aharon and their followers. They had no particular claim, but rather they were Reshem, who altogether rejected Moshe's and Aharon's leadership. Datan and Aharon would have liked to see themselves proclaimed the heads in place of Moshe and Aharon. Korach won over to his party 250 men, most of them tribesmen of Reuven, Korach's neighbors. According to some opinions, these 250 men were firstborn. They attempted to reclaim the privilege of performing the avodah, which after the sin of the golden calf had been transferred to the tribe of Levi. It is also possible that they wanted the great people of each tribe to participate in the avodah. Who were these 250 followers of Korach? The Torah does not disclose their names, thus sparing them from shame. However, from the description of the Torah, we understand that they were leaders of the tribes, Elitzur ben Shedayur and the rest, and men of similarly high positions. A boy from a respectable family was caught picking pockets in a bathhouse. When the owner of the bathhouse was asked the thief's identity, he refrained from answering directly, out of respect for the boy's family. He mentioned only that the thief was tall, good-looking, and from a famous family. From his description, people were able to guess whom he meant. Similarly, the Torah does not explicitly name the members of Korach's assembly. Instead, it refers to them as Nesi'im of the congregation, enumerated by name, which we interpret to mean the Nesi'im of the tribes enumerated in Bamidbar 1:5-16, and to similar great and wise men. Korach, with his glib tongue, persuaded them that it was unjust for a single tribe and community of Yisrael to perform the service, while all others were excluded from this privilege. In contrast to Korach, who pursued the argument purely for selfish reasons, these 250 men sincerely believed that community of Yisrael as a whole would benefit if all the tribes could achieve the spiritual greatness derived from performing the avodah, attired in blue garments, Korach, Datan, and Aharon, and the men brazenly presented themselves before Moshe and Aharon. The spokesman Korach addressed Moshe as follows: "You commanded us to affix a tekhilet strand to our garments. We did better. We made garments entirely of tekhilet. Tell us, do such garments still require a tekhilet string or not?" Korach's plan was as follows. Should Moshe answer in the negative, he would argue, just as a garment of tekhilet requires no tekhilet thread, so too the Jews are all holy, and do not need Aharon and the Kohanim to represent them before Hashem. Obviously, these words were a mere provocation and thus insincere. In reality, Korach did believe the community of Yisrael should have a Kohen Gadol, namely himself. Should Moshe reply, on the other hand, that a tekhilet garment does require a tekhilet thread, Korach would ridicule this mitzvah and argue that Moshe had invented it. Moshe replied to Korach's query, "I heard from Hashem that even if a garment is made entirely of tekhilet, it nevertheless needs a tekhilet string." At that, Korach attacked the mitzvah of tzitzit, deciding that tekhilet garments did not need extra tekhilet threads. Then he began to denigrate all the mitzvot. He proclaimed, "We heard only 10 commandments at Har Sinai. We never heard from Hashem all these laws about teruma, ma'azros, tithes, chala, or tzitzit. You, Moshe, invented them in order to rule over us and bring honor to your brother Aharon. What have the Jewish people gained under your leadership, Moshe and Aharon? You have made life more difficult than it was in Egypt. We pay teruma to the Kohanim, maaser to the Levites, and give 24 different gifts to the Kohanim. Moreover, every year 15,000 of us will perish in the wilderness. You have seized too many high positions. You, Moshe, usurped the kingship. Why did you also appoint your brother as the Kohen Gadol? You have no right to proclaim yourselves heads over this community, whose members are all holy, and in whose midst the Shekhinah resides." Korach and his followers were ready to stone Moshe and Aharon. Moshe fell on his face. His prostration signified that he humbled himself and sought no authority over others, as Korach claimed. He meekly answered Korach, "I do not seek power, nor did Aharon seek to be the high priest. My brother Aharon, who stood by, did not refute Korach's vile arguments with one word. He was silent throughout the entire dispute, as though humbly, acknowledging that Korach was indeed more deserving of the Kehuna Gedala than he, and he only held the position because he obeyed Hashem. The true greatness of the two brothers, Moshe and Aharon, the extreme trepidation with which they approached their offices, is illustrated by the following incident. When Moshe anointed Aharon with the Shemen Hamishcha to consecrate him as the high priest, Aharon trembled and shrank back. 2 drops of the oil then spilled from Aharon's forehead into his beard. They were caught there, one on the right and one on the left, glittering like 2 pearls. Moshe worriedly asked himself whether he had poured slightly too much oil onto Aharon's forehead, and the Almighty would consider him guilty of Me'ilah, misappropriating a sacred object. Aharon was even more worried, fearing that he might be guilty of deriving personal benefit from a sacred object, since the Shemen Hamishka was meant to be placed only on his forehead and not in his beard. Both brothers were only reassured when a heavenly voice proclaimed, "You are both free of blame." The Shemen Hamishcha dropped into Aharon's beard by heavenly providence. It was meant to be there. How good and how pleasant it is for brothers to dwell together. The good oil upon the head running down upon the beard of Aharon, is like the dew of Hermon descending upon the mountains of Zion. For there Hashem has commanded the blessing, life for eternity. Tehillim 133, 1-3. Although the dew first descends upon Har Hermon, it is meant to spill over to Har Zion that is blessed by Hashem. Similarly, although the mitzvah was to anoint Aharon's forehead, the oil was meant to reach his beard too. When Moshe heard this, he rejoiced as much as if the oil had dropped into his own beard. This Midrash indicates that Moshe and Aharon, who occupied the positions of a king and of a high priest, were constantly on guard lest they misuse their offices for personal benefit, even in the slightest way. Moshe therefore never accepted gifts from anyone, a rule which he upheld until the end of his life. Aharon was even more concerned than Moshe because he received the 24 gifts given to the Kohanim. Throughout his life, he never ceased his concern not to accept or consume them other than fully l'shaim shamayim. Moshe answered Korach and his assembly as follows. You claim that I seek greatness, that I appointed Aharon as the nation's high priest because he is my brother, and that I made his sons Kohanim because they are my nephews. Moreover, you claim that I chose the Levites for the service instead of the firstborn for personal reasons, without a divine commandment. Finally, you say that I myself decided that the Levites should be subservient to Aharon, rather than also being Kohanim. Let me explain to you first that you are making a basic error. Hashem did not ask my opinion as to who should be chosen for any holy office. Just as he separated day and night so that all the magicians of Egypt cannot turn day into night, or night into day, so he separated certain Jews to be holy unto Herm and to perform his service. Just as he distinguished the Jewish people from the nations, so too he distinguished Aharon within the Jewish people as Holy of Holies, and the Kohanim as holier than the non-Kohanim. We can change his system no more than we can change day to night or night to day. I sympathize with your desire that many people from all the tribes perform the service. The nations of the world, in fact, have many priests because they worship many deities, and each deity has its own temple and priest. However, we Jews are different. We acknowledge only one God, and we all believe in one Torah. Hashem commanded that there be only one Kohen Gadol, one whom he selects to perform the service. He appointed only one tribe, the tribe of Levi, for Kahuna and Leviah. Therefore, it is impossible for all of you who are assembled here to take part in the service of the Mishkan. If you don't believe me, let us conduct a test tomorrow. Today I have no permission to perform this experiment. Moshe thought that if he delayed until the next morning, the effect of Korach's meal and wine would have worn off, and his followers would realize their folly and do teshuvah. The test would then become redundant. However, Moshe did not reveal the true reason for delaying the test for fear of provoking a counter-argument. Anyone who claims that he is chosen for the service may come here tomorrow morning with a pan filled with ketoret and offer it up. You know that a non-Kohen who offers Keteret is liable to death at the hands of heaven. Hence, if you are spared from death, your claim that you are all worthy of occupying positions in the Mishkan will be proven right. However, I warn you that this is a suicidal test. Only the holiest person will survive, and all the rest will perish." Upon hearing these words, Korach assumed that he would certainly survive, since he was destined to become the progenitor of great descendants. The 250 men were by now so consumed by the desire to perform the avodah that they were willing to risk their lives for it. Datan and Aviram were not interested in Moshe's speech and in his suggestion. While he was still speaking, they returned to their tents. They did not participate in the test the next day. Moshe continued to address Korach with gentle words, hoping to end the argument. Fearful lest the entire tribe of Levi be drawn after Korach, Moshe pleaded with its members, "Please listen to me, sons of Levi. Be content with the honor of singing and performing other tasks in the Mishkan. Why should you seek to become Kohanim? You, Korach, and your followers, you do not argue against Aharon, for he was granted the kahuna by the Almighty. You are really opposing Hashem. Had Aharon sought the kahuna, you would have a claim. However, he did not desire his office. What has he gained by it? He buried his 2 sons, Nadav and Avihu." Korach made no answer but remained silent. He thought, "Moshe is very wise and knowledgeable. No matter what argument I present, he will refute it with powerful counter-arguments. If I continue the debate, he will persuade my followers to make peace." He therefore did not argue further, but persisted in his claim. Moshe saw that Korach could not be swayed. He therefore attempted to reconcile Datan and Aviram, sending messengers to summon them to the Mishkan. However, Datan and Aviram received those messengers with open mockery. "We are not taking orders from Ben Amram," they announced. "We will not come up. Is it not enough that you led us out of Egypt, a land flowing with milk and honey, truly a second Gan Eden, and brought us to the wilderness where you have decreed death upon us? Should you and your brother also proclaim yourselves rulers over us?" Datan and Aviram described Egypt in glowing terms because they would have preferred to stay there after the redemption. "You, Moshe," they jeered, "have established yourself as a king, and your brother became a high priest. To the Levites you gave jobs as porters for your brother's vessels. When you inaugurated them for the service, you spoiled their appearance by shaving them bald. You promised to bring us to a land flowing with milk and honey, and to give us fields and vineyards. You never did. Instead, you taught us all the prohibitions concerning the land. Do not sow 2 species in a field or vineyard. Do not plow your field with an ox and donkey harnessed together. Do not cultivate your field during Shemitah. Yet none of us ever received a field or a vineyard. Do you think that your promises can obscure the truth? Even if you decide to punish us by having our eyes pulled out, we refuse to come up. The verdict of the fool is pronounced by his own mouth." Mishlai 1:7. Truly, Datan and Aviram did not come up, just as they unwittingly prophesied. They would not come up from underneath the ground, where they would sink together with Korach, nor would they come up to Eretz Yisrael, a land flowing with milk and honey. Moshe was deeply grieved by Datan's and Aviram's reaction to his message. Turning to Hashem, he prayed, "Hashem, I beg you, do not deal with them according to your quality of mercy, but with strictness. Unless you punish them immediately, their pernicious influence poses a threat to the entire people. Do not accept their or Korach's share in the daily communal sacrifices, lest their punishment be deferred. You know the truth, Hashem, that I never established myself as a king over them, as they say. A king taxes his subjects, whereas I do not even accept a salary work in the Mishkan or on behalf of the community. Neither do I ask the people to reimburse me for any expenses I incur on their behalf. When I rented a donkey to travel from Midian to Egypt in order to redeem the people, I was entitled to ask for reimbursement, but I paid with my own money. I never wronged anyone by rendering unfair judgment. I did not punish Datan and Aviram, although they informed against me to Pharaoh that I killed an Egyptian. You know that in all my dealings with the community, I act only for your honor." Moshe ended by repeating to Korach, "You and your followers may come tomorrow to the entrance of the Mishkan, each holding a pan filled with ketoret. We will then see whose ketoret the Almighty will accept as a sign that he chose him for the service." The punishment of Korach, Datan and Aviram, and the 250 men that night, Korach went from tribe to tribe, speaking against Moshe in order to gain more supporters. He declared, "Do you think that I have established this party for my own sake? Certainly not. It aims at restoring all the Jews to their rightful positions. Why are you silent while Moshe makes himself the king and grants the Kehuna as an eternal law to his brother? Each Jew is worthy of becoming a Kohen Gadol, for he heard at Har Sinai, 'And you shall be unto me a kingdom of Kohanim and a holy people.'" Korach had an appropriate argument for each tribe. For example, he aroused the tribe of Yehuda by reminding its members, "Our forefather Yaakov prophesied that your tribe is the royal tribe. Why do you allow Moshe to rule over you?" The members of the tribe of Reuven were incited with the declaration, "Although the founder of your tribe was the firstborn among Yaakov's sons, you have no special firstborn rights. How do you tolerate that? See how great is the power of a single individual to instigate others to sin, and how powerful is the influence of slander." Because of Korach's incitement, the entire people followed him to the entrance of the Ohel Moed the next morning. When Korach and his 250 followers appeared before the Mishkan in the morning, the entire community of Israel was present. Korach's claim that his dispute was for the communal benefit had won over the people sufficiently that no one voiced a protest. Some people began to believe that after all there might be some truth to Korach's claims. Maybe Hashem would agree to restore the Kehuna to the firstborn? Moshe and Aharon stood at the entrance of the Ohel Moed on one side, and Korach with his 250 men on the other. They held pans that had been donated by Korach. He was so wealthy that his household contained suitable pans, which he distributed among his followers. The Shekinah appeared in the cloud of glory at the entrance of the Ohel Moed, and the Almighty commanded Moshe and Aharon, "Separate yourselves from the rest of the people, and I shall consume them in an instant." That the Almighty's anger was kindled against all the Jews because they had not protested against Korach. By casting doubt upon truth of Moshe's words, the Jews were considered as though they had attacked Hashem. For one who doubts his Rebbe's words is considered as though he had risen against the Shekinah. Sanhedrin 110a. Moshe and Aharon fell upon their faces and entreated Hashem to spare community of Israel. They argued, "Hashem, you know every person's mind. A human king may have to annihilate all his subjects, even if only some of them rebel against him, because he cannot distinguish the guilty from the innocent. You, however, know that children of Israel are not rebelling against you. They merely came here because Korach persuaded them to do so. It is only Korach who has rebelled against you." Hashem replied, "Your tefillah is accepted. I shall act mercifully towards the people. Only Korach, Datan, and Aviram and their families will be destroyed. Command the people to distance themselves from the tents of these wicked men, and to touch nothing of theirs. Once the destroying angel is let loose, he consumes all that he finds in the vicinity of the Reshaim." Hearing God's decree, Moshe attempted to speak to Datan and Aviram in order to spare them from destruction. Followed by the 70 elders, Moshe himself walked toward Datan's and Aviram's tents. He felt certain that they would receive the leader of community of Israel respectfully. However, these Reshaim refused to appear at the entrance of their tents to speak to him. Moshe thereupon commanded community of Israel according to Hashem's instructions, "Depart from the tents of these wicked men, and touch nothing of theirs, lest you yourselves be destroyed because of their sins." Datan and Aviram incurred the death penalty long ago. In Egypt, they were informers to Pharaoh. At the Yam Suf, they incited their followers to return to Egypt. They went out to gather man on Shabbos. Now they have transgressed Hashem's word. They are brazen and instigate strife. When Datan and Aviram saw the Jews retreat from their tents, they finally appeared at the entrances. and along with their wives, showered Moshe with a flood of vile curses and blasphemies. Moshe then addressed community of Yisrael. You will now receive proof that I acted by divine command when I appointed Aharon Kohain Gadol, his sons Kohanim, and Elitzaphan Nasi of children of Kehas, and that all my other words and actions are dictated by the Almighty. If Datan, Aharon, and Korach pass away as people usually do, from sickness or old age in their beds, and their corpses are brought to burial, Korach's claim is true. I will acknowledge and profess that Hashem has not sent me, and that I filled the high offices with my own choices. Moshe turned to Hashem and prayed, I ask of you, God, to punish these Reshaim with a death unique in history. Moshe, said Hashem, what do you want me to do? Master of the universe, prayed Moshe, if you have created an entrance to Gehinnom where these people are standing, well and good. If not, ask you to perform a miracle. Move the opening of Gehinnom to beneath their feet, and let them be transported. They're alive. Then it will be evident to all that they have blasphemed Hashem. The question arises why Moshe, who usually sought mercy for sinners, here actively entreated the Almighty to punish Korach and his followers with an immediate and unusual death. The following parable offers us an insight. The princess's wedding celebration was underway. The bride commanded universal respect and esteem because it was well known that she was as chaste as she was beautiful. Suddenly, a demagogue climbed upon one of the tables and began shouting at the assembly, You are all speaking highly of our bride because you think she is a respectable maiden. If you want to know the truth, listen to me. I could tell you stories about her that should not be mentioned in public. The audience was shocked. Instantly, wild rumors began to circulate, and whispers turned into raised voices. The matchmaker, who knew the princess well from her youth, realized that the defamer was only attempting to draw attention to himself and incite the people for his own purposes. The matchmaker demanded of the king, have this man, who brazenly slandered the princess, beheaded this very instant. If you don't order his immediate execution, I will second his accusations. The king thought, if I delay the defamer's execution, people will believe that his accusations are true. Similarly, Moshe proclaimed, unless you, Hashem, punish Korach and his supporters instantly, I will also support his claim. By publicly ridiculing Moshe, Datan and Aharon had brought the Torah, the king's daughter, into disrepute. Korach claimed that some of Moshe's statements were not of divine origin, but of his own creation. Had these defamers gone unpunished, for even a short time, their apicorsis would have spread to the rest of the people. Our belief in the divinity of the Torah is predicated upon the historical fact of Hashem's revelation on Har Sinai before the entire community of Yisrael and of Moshe's appointment as his divine eyes of agent. By denying some of Moshe's statements while Moshe was yet alive, Korach and his followers had put the divine origin of the entire Torah in doubt. Others might follow his example by challenging other parts of the Torah, and eventually the veracity of the entire Torah would be questionable. Later generations would then certainly doubt the authenticity of the Torah, arguing, even in Moshe's generation there were those who disputed the divinity of the Torah. How can we today be certain who was right, Moshe or Korach? Thus, Moshe prayed to Hashem, Master of the universe, had these men merely attacked me and my brother, I would have remained silent. However, I may not remain silent when the honor of the Torah is at stake. AD. He therefore requested that the Almighty make a unique demonstration in the punishment of these men. The very moment Moshe ended his tefillah, Hashem fulfilled his request. He performed a miracle as spectacular as the creation of the world, which clearly exposed Korach and his company as liars. The earth split open, widening gradually where Korach's, Datan's, and Aviram's tents stood. With a powerful suction, it drew them and their families downwards, together with their tents and all their belongings. The punishment of Datan's and Aviram's children illustrates the severity of the sin of causing strife. Usually, the heavenly tribunal does not punish anyone younger than 20, and a human Beit Din does not punish a boy younger than 13. However, in the sin of inciting machloks, even young babies are included in the punishment, as happened in the case of Korach's followers. No trace of these Reshaim remained. Whatever they possessed was magnetically drawn into the abyss. Even if one's garment was in the laundry, or he had lent a small item such as a needle to another Jew, it was drawn into the opening and disappeared. Even if the names of Korach, Datan, or Aviram were inscribed on a document, the script miraculously vanished. Whoever supports a machlokes is blotted out, and no memory of him remains. Korach's fortune, which had enabled him to create a revolt against Moshe, was forever lost. He did not even merit that another Jew should perform good deeds with it. As Moshe had requested, the Almighty opened Gehinnom at the bottom of the abyss and transported the Reshaim there alive. While they were sinking, children of Israel heard them confess loudly, "Hashem is righteous, his judgment truthful. The words of his servant Moshe are true, and we are Reshaim for having rebelled against him." Gehinnom has 7 compartments, the lowest of which is termed Sheol. These Reshaim descended to Sheol. God created the opening of Gehinnom at the bottom of the pit, and not at the surface of the earth, lest Gehinnom's radiation destroy the world. Rabba bar Hana related, "Once while traveling, I met an Arab, Eliyahu in the guise of an Arab, who asked me, 'Shall I show you the spot where Korach and his followers were swallowed?' He led me to 2 openings in the ground from which I saw smoke rising. He brought a piece of moist cotton, stuck it to the edge of a spear, and inserted it into the earth. When he pulled the spear out, the cotton was singed." "Now listen carefully," said the Arab. "Out of the depths I discerned the words, 'Moshe is true and so is his Torah.' It was the confession of the Reshaim who, after death, must acknowledge the truth." The man informed me, "Every 30 days these people are brought up here to repeat their confession. Then they are cast back into Gehinnom to smolder there, like meat in a roasting pan. The sufferings of Gehinnom bring home to the Reshaim that they sinned. Every month Korach and his followers recognize the severity of their crime more profoundly, but they are returned to Gehinnom to achieve an even deeper clarity of comprehension. This cycle continues until Tekias Hamaisim, when they will have fully expiated their sin." What happened to the 250 men who stood with their pans of kataret at the entrance of the Mishkan? A fire fell from heaven and consumed them. They did not merit burial but were completely erased. They were blotted out for the sin of joining a machlokes. Nevertheless, these 250 men were not swallowed by the earth. Hashem spared them from that ignoble death because of their merits. Korach himself, however, received a 2-fold punishment. First, his soul was consumed by the heavenly fire, and then his body rolled toward the gap in the earth underneath his tent. Why did he incur both punishments? Had he not been burnt, those who were would have complained. He was the instigator, and yet he suffered a lesser punishment than we. He was merely swallowed by the earth. Had he not been swallowed, those who were would have complained. It is not fair that Korach, the instigator of the rebellion, suffered the lighter punishment, since each party imagines that the other's punishment is less severe. Now, however, everyone acknowledged God's justice. Moreover, Korach was punished midda keneged midda. He denied the veracity of the Torah that maintains heaven and earth, as it says, Yirmiyahu 33:25. "If not for my covenant, the Torah, by day and night, I would not sustain the laws of heaven and earth." Therefore he was punished with fire from heaven and being swallowed by the earth. The 250 men saw how Korach's body, a veritable fireball, rolled toward the opening of the earth and disappeared inside. As soon as the sinners and their belongings had plummeted into the depths, the earth closed its breach. Its surface looked as smooth as before. Not even the tiniest split was visible. No one could have been misled into thinking that a natural earthquake had occurred, since after a natural event a gap is detectable. Here the earth miraculously acted like a living creature, opening its mouth to devour what it desires and then closing it again. When the earth opened, children of Israel were seized by panic, afraid lest they be swallowed too. Even after the crack was sealed, The people continued scurrying about and fleeing in all directions, for from beneath the ground they heard the sinners cry out, "Help! Moshe Rabbeinu, save us!" Aharon's survival and the burning of the 250 men proved that Aharon was chosen for the kahuna. The miracle of the earth swallowing Korach, Datan, Aviram, and their households manifested the truth of Moshe's calling. Those who were saved from destruction, Korach's sons. When Korach was drawn into the abyss, his 3 sons, Asir, Elkanah, and Abiasaph, too, rolled downwards. However, they were not drawn into the depth of Gehinnom, but miraculously came to rest on high platforms that the Almighty had erected for them. Thus they remained alive. In what merit did they survive? In their hearts, Korach's sons were aware of the truth. When Moshe came to visit Korach in his tent while the family was sitting at the table, they thought, "If we arise for Moshe, we offend our father. If we remain seated, on the other hand, we transgress the mitzvah of arising for a Talmid Chacham. We shall not violate a Torah commandment, even if father will be angry." They therefore arose in honor of Moshe. When the destruction of Korach and his followers began, Korach's sons did teshuvah in their hearts. Upon witnessing the earth splitting and swallowing their father and his followers, they were paralyzed, with fear and unable to confess their sins orally. However, the Almighty, who knows a person's thoughts, saw their change of mind. Therefore, he allowed them to survive. The pasuk says, "A song concerning the roses, children of Korach." Tehillim 46:1. Why does it term Korach's sons roses? People who saw them used to remark, "They are thorns, just like their father." In the hour of destruction, however, Hashem guarded the roses from being burned together with the thorns. Korach's sons composed several psalms in the book of Tehillim, among them one in which they describe how they were almost confined to Gehinnom. "My life draws near to Sheol. I am reckoned with those who go down to the pit." Tehillim 88:4-5. In chapter 49, they appeal to all mankind to learn the moral of their father's fate. Those who trust in their wealth and boast with the multitude of their riches, none of them can redeem his brother, nor give God a ransom for him. Do not be afraid when someone becomes rich, when the glory of his house is increased, for when he dies he shall carry nothing away. His glory will not descend after him. Man has the option to obtain greatness by studying Torah and serving Hashem, yet he understands not. He like the beasts that perish, and of which no remnant remains. Whereas, although a Talmid Chacham's body perishes, his soul lives on. Tehillim 49:7-8, 17, 18, 21. On another follower of Korach, On, also escaped death. He was a member of Reuven, a neighbor of Korach's family, and as such, drawn into the rebellion. When On returned home from the first meeting, he related to his wife that he was taking part in a revolt. She argued, "What do you gain by it? Your position will be the same whether Aharon or Korach is the Kohen Gadol." He conceded the logic of her words, but explained that he could no longer disengage himself from Korach's party, since he had sworn at the meeting to join in offering Kataret on the following morning. In order to rescue her husband from disaster, On's wife contrived a plot. She mixed a strong drink that put him to sleep. Then she and her daughter uncovered their hair and sat at the entrance of their tent. When Korach sent a messenger to summon On, he turned back at the sight of On's wife and daughter. So did several other messengers. Thus, On never appeared before the Ohel Moed. Korach had spoken well in depicting community of Yisrael as a holy congregation in whose midst is the Shekinah. The Torah level of Zenius was accepted by the entire generation. It was a matter of course that even Korach's messengers would not address a woman whose hair was uncovered. When death struck the Rishim, the bed in which On slept began to slide toward the abyss. On's wife gripped its edge and prayed, "Master of the universe, On has disassociated himself from Korach's clique. He swore by your great name that he is not Korach's follower. If he ever transgresses his word, you can then punish him." On was spared, and thereafter his wife reprimanded him. "Now go to Moshe to apologize." "I am too embarrassed to face him," replied On. On's wife then went to Moshe, weeping bitterly and relating what had happened to her husband. Upon receiving her report, Moshe walked to On's tent and spoke to him encouragingly, saying, "Come out, may the Almighty forgive you." For the remainder of his life, On did not cease from mourning and doing teshuvah for once having sided with Korach. His name alludes to this. On, he was in a state of mourning, Ben Peleh, a son, man, who was rescued from destruction by a miracle. The wise one among the women builds her house. Mishlai 9:1. This verse refers to On's wife and daughter whose wisdom rescued their household from destruction, but the wicked woman demolishes it with her own hands, was taught in reference to Korach's wife, who ruined her husband and her household. 3 wives caused their husbands' deaths. Chava, because she persuaded Adam to taste of the fruit of the Eitz Hada'az. Delilah, who extracted from Shimshon the secret of his power, and thereafter delivered him to his death. Queen Isabel, who influenced her husband, King Ahav, to perform wicked deeds. I Melachim 21:25. Other wives rescued their husbands from death, among them On's wife, who prevented him from joining Korach. Michal bas Shaul, who helped David escape from the death trap that Shaul had set for him. Shmuel 19:11. Our sages have taught that a husband who follows his wife's advice in spiritual matters causes himself to fall into Gehinnom. The husband is usually more expert at Torah matters. Moreover, a woman often seeks a higher standard of living, even at the expense of her husband's learning. In practical matters, however, a husband should listen to his wife's advice. The pans of Korach and his followers are made into a covering for the altar. The pans in which Korach and his followers had offered Ketoret could no longer serve profane purposes, because they had been consecrated for the Avodah. In accordance with Hashem's commandment, Moshe instructed Eleazar, son of Aharon, to gather all the pans from the ashes, beat them flat, and form from them a covering for the exterior altar. Why did Hashem assign the task of collecting the pans from the scene of disaster to Eleazar rather than to Aharon? Korach had contested not only Aharon's position as a Kohen Gadol, but also that of Eleazar ben Aharon as a Kohen. Eleazar gathered the pans as a demonstration of his divine calling as a Kohen, and eventually as a successor to his father as the high priest. Moreover, the Almighty did not direct Aharon to gather the pans of the sinners, so as to avoid rumors that Aharon rejoiced to see his opponent's destruction. In truth, Aharon was above any desire of revenge. His character was flawless, similar to an angel's. However, Hashem did not wish him to be needlessly suspected. What was the purpose of converting the pans of the rebels into a covering for the Mizbeach? This new covering would deter future generations from contesting the position of kahuna. Anyone arguing that a Jew from a family of non-Kohanim should be chosen as a Kohen would be warned, "Look at the covering of the copper altar. It was made from the pans of men who disputed the kahuna and were therefore burned." Hashem informed Moshe, "In the future, any non-Kohen who usurps the position of kahuna will be smitten with tzara'at, since one reason that tzara'at is brought upon a person is the sin of claiming a position that is not his by right." Hashem's word was fulfilled upon King Uzziyahu. Uzziyahu understood the verse, "And David's sons were Kohanim," 2 Shmuel 8:18, in its literal sense. In reality, Kohanim, in this context, implies that they were of noble rank. He inferred from it that kings are entitled to offer korbanos just like Kohanim. Hence he entered the Beit HaMikdash to offer Ketoret. The angel Michael complained to the Almighty, "Master of the universe, you appointed Aharon to minister before you below, just as you appointed me to minister above. You gave Aharon 22 Levites to serve him, corresponding to the 22 angels that serve you in heaven. Unless you inflict a penalty upon Uzziyahu, people will think that kings are permitted to perform the avoda, just like Kohanim. Let him both be burned and swallowed like Korach." Hashem immediately punished Uzziyahu, as it says, Ki Divrei Hayamim, D6:19, and the tzara'at broke out on his forehead. Why did the plague manifest itself on his forehead first? He was smitten in the spot where the Kohen Gadol's tzitz, headband, is placed. The Almighty thus publicized that he was not a Kohen. Children of Israel are punished with a plague for complaining about the death of the 250 men. The morning after the death of Korach and his 250 men, an atmosphere of shock and depression prevailed. Children of Israel had lost many of their great people, among them members of the Sanhedrin. Turning to Moshe and Aharon, the Jews accused them, "You caused the deaths of these people. Why did you counsel them to offer keteret that is fatal to anyone who offers it without an explicit divine commandment?" Nadav and Avihu were also killed when they brought keteret without being commanded to do so. Children of Israel's accusation constituted lashon hara, slander. The Almighty immediately revealed himself in the cloud of glory to protect Moshe and Aharon, and he sent out the angel Ketzef to strike the people with a plague. Moshe and Aharon fell upon their faces to beg Hashem not to punish the people. However, no words of prayer emanated from their lips. The Almighty, who grants man the power of speech, prevented them from interceding for the sinners. Moshe therefore resorted to an emergency measure. Turning to Aharon, he ordered, "Take the sacred pan for offering keteret, bring burning coals from the exterior altar, and heap keteret upon them. Hurry to the camp and let the smoke of the keteret ascend to heaven. You will thus stop the plague." "Please, my master," replied Aharon, "how am I permitted to take fire from the holy altar to burn keteret outside the Mishkan? I shall perish just like my sons Nadav and Avihu." "Hurry," Moshe urged. "You are losing precious time. While you are talking, more Jews are passing away." Aharon obeyed, thinking, "I am ready to sacrifice my life for community of Yisrael." Moshe, the trusted prophet of Hashem, was empowered to take exceptional emergency measures. Luan X 17. He commanded that the keteret be offered outside its usual place and at an unusual time. How did Moshe know that the keteret would end the plague? He had learned this secret when he had ascended to heaven to receive the luchos. At that time, the angels protested to Hashem against entrusting his holy Torah to the hands of human beings. Moshe reasoned with them that God formulated the mitzvot of the Torah precisely for people with yitzrai hara. The angels, though capable of studying secrets of Torah beyond the ken of man, do not need the mitzvot to perfect themselves. The angels acknowledged the wisdom of Moshe's argument. To express their consent, they gave him special gifts. The angel of death taught Moshe a secret. If Moshe were to burn keteret while standing before him, he would be prevented from performing his work of destruction. Aharon brought the pan with the burning keteret to the camp, prayed, and with the keteret created a partition of smoke between the dead and the living. Aharon encountered the angel of death. "Let me complete my work," said the angel. "Do not hinder me." "Moshe has sent me to prevent you," replied Aharon. The angel refused to obey. Aharon then seized him, forcibly brought him to the Ohel Moed, and the plague ended. Our sages expressed in simple terms the concept that the angel of death had the power to perform his work, because their sins acted as accusers against the Jews and made them liable to death. The keteret, however, evokes the presence of the Shekinah. Together with his tefillah, Aharon was able to overcome the accusations against community of Yisrael. Thus the angel's work was interrupted. When Rabbi Akka came to visit the village of Tarsha, the villagers heard of his arrival and said, "A great man has arrived. Let us go to him for help." They came before him and asked him, "Our master, are you not worried about our misfortune?" "What is the matter?" asked Rabbi Akka. "Death has come to this village a week ago," the people replied, "and the plague does not come to a halt." He told them, "Let us go to the Beit Hakneset and beseech the Almighty for mercy." While they were walking, they were joined by other villagers who told of the victims who had just passed away, and of many people who were fatally ill. "The situation is grave," said Rabbi Akka. "Do as follows. Choose 40 men who are tzaddikim. I shall be among them. We will divide them in 4 groups of 10. Each group of 10 shall go to one corner of the village and recite there with concentration the Parasha of the Keteret and also that of the Korbanos, repeating it 3 times. They followed his instructions, and thereafter he ordered, "Go to the houses where people are dying. Separate them from the living and again recite the Parshios as you did before. Afterwards, say the verses. And Moshe said to Aharon, "Take the pan." And Aharon took, and he stood between the dead. 17, 11, 13. As soon as they had done so, the angel of death departed from the village. That night Rabbi Acha heard in his sleep a heavenly voice that instructed him, "Now tell the villagers to do teshuvah. You had the knowledge how to drive away the angel of death, but know that these people are sinners, and therefore the punishment will yet come upon them. Instruct them to do perfect teshuvah, and to take upon themselves never to depart from Torah study. Also tell them to change the village's name, because a change of name causes a change of the mazal." The Keteret was also chosen as the appropriate means to stop the plague because the children of Israel maligned it. They clamored, "The Keteret acts like poison. It killed Nadav and Abihu, and now it has destroyed 250 men." The Almighty responded, "The Keteret will now rescue Jews from death," thus demonstrating that it is not responsible for a person's death, but rather his sins are. When through burning Keteret, Aharon rescued the people from the plague, their claim that the Keteret had slain 250 men was disproved. The Jews complained that 3 holy objects brought death. The Keteret. They grumbled. Through the Keteret Nadav, Abihu, and Korach's followers were slain. The Aharon people whispered, "It slew the Pelishtim, the inhabitants of Beit Shemesh and Uzzah, in King David's time." Moshe's staff. It was maligned as being responsible for bringing about the 10 plagues in Egypt and the 10 at the Yam Suf. Hashem caused each of these holy things to bring blessings upon children of Israel, so that they should recognize their error. The Keteret ended the plague as just explained. The Aharon bestowed blessing and greatness upon the man Oved in whose house it stayed for 3 months. Kir Shmuel 6:11. In this short time his family was blessed with numerous children who became distinguished in Torah. In Masa Umeriva, the Almighty ordered Moshe to smite the rock with the very rod, which had brought about the plagues in Egypt. The rock, as a result, gave forth water. Shmot 17:5. The staff of Levi blossoms to demonstrate this tribe's selection and Aharon's kahuna. After the earth swallowed Korach, Datan, and Abiram, it was clear beyond any doubt that Moshe was the divinely chosen leader. Aharon's divine calling as a high priest too was manifested when the 250 men who contested his position were burnt alive. Nevertheless, some people continued to insist that Moshe should not have disqualified the firstborn from performing the avodah, assigning the service to the Levites in their place. They desired that all the tribes participate in the service through their firstborn. Hashem therefore performed a miracle that clearly demonstrated his selection of the tribe of Levi, and thus put an end to these claims. The miracle also reaffirmed Aharon's divine selection as Kohen Gadol, 180. Hashem commanded Moshe, "Take 12 rods. On each, inscribe the name of the Massi of a tribe. On the rod of Levi, inscribe Aharon's name. Place the rods overnight in the Ohel Moed. The staff of the tribe chosen for my service will miraculously blossom." In order to forestall possible claims that one rod contained more moisture than the rest, and therefore it blossomed, Moshe cut 12 identical rods from one big log. He commanded each Nasi to mark his name on one. Moshe placed the rods in the Ohel Moed, with Aharon's in the center, so that no one should assert Aharon's staff sprouted because it rested on the side that is closer to the Shekinah. When Moshe entered the Mishkan the next morning, Aharon's rod was budding with leaves, blossoms, and almonds. This miracle contained another within it, for the blossoms did not fall off after the fruit appeared, as is usually the case. Moreover, Hashem's 4-letter name was miraculously engraved upon Aharon's rod, as it was engraved upon the tzitz, headband, of the Kohen Gadol. This demonstrated that Aharon was chosen as the high priest, wearer of the tzitz. Why did Aharon's rod blossom? This miracle indicated the presence of the Shekinah, that imbues even inanimate objects with life and causes them to sprout. Almonds, in connection with a prophecy or miracle, symbolize that the Almighty will bring about his decree in a hurry. The word almonds is derived from hurry. This tree's blossoms faster than those of other trees. Hashem hinted that anyone usurping the kahuna would be instantly punished. Appear. This was demonstrated in the case of King Uzziyahu. When he entered the Beit HaMikdash to perform a priestly service, he was immediately stricken with Zaraat. Finally, after the entire series of signs and miracles, all the Jews were convinced that Moshe's prophecy was true in all details. Aharon's staff never withered. Its stem, blossoms, and almonds remained evergreen. Hashem commanded Moshe to place it near the Aharon as a testimony for future generations that from all the tribes, Levi was chosen for both Kahuna and Leviah. The Jewish kings were entrusted with preserving Aharon's rod. Before the destruction of the first Beit HaMikdash, King Yoshiyahu concealed it together with the other testimonial objects and holy vessels. The Kohanim and Levites must prevent children of Israel from performing the avodah. After having experienced the many deaths that occurred in connection with the service of the Mishkan, children of Israel were greatly frightened. They exclaimed, "The Mishkan is a source of tragedy. Death set in with Korach's congregation and will eventually strike us all. It is your task to prevent entry by any unauthorized person to any area of the Mishkan forbidden to him," Hashem warned both the Kohanim and Levites. "If you fail, you will be punished." The mitzvah to guard the Mishkan and Beit HaMikdash, Hashem commanded the Kohanim and Levites to guard the Mishkan and Beit HaMikdash every night. Hashem, who guards the world, needs no human guards to protect his palace. He commanded that an honor guard be posted around it to impress its greatness upon the Jews. A guarded building is approached by visitors with awe because it is considered distinguished, like a king's palace. 24 guard were stationed nightly in different places around the Beit HaMikdash. The Kohanim stood on guard in 3 places in the Azara, and the Levites in 21 places outside it. One inspector checked on the vigilance of all the guards. If he found anyone sleeping, he hit him with a stick and had the right to singe. His garments matnos kahuna, the gifts that are given to the Kohanim. The proverb goes, "If my cow breaks a leg, it is for my benefit." Every misfortune has some benefit. Aharon benefited from Korach's dispute, for subsequently the Almighty entered with him into a covenant that confirmed that the Kohanim would forever receive the 24 gifts of priesthood. The emperor once gave his friend an estate as a casual gift. He did not sign a deed nor confirm with any other legality that he had granted this estate to his friend. However, thereafter, impostors asserted that these fields were theirs. The emperor then informed his friend, "Now I will order the gift put on record officially, so that no one can deny that you are its true owner." Similarly, after Korach disputed Aharon's right to the Kahuna, Hashem made an official contract with the Kohanim by promising them and their descendants forever 24 gifts, which children of Israel are obligated to separate for them. Hashem proclaimed, "I bestow these gifts upon you willingly and happily, as one writes out a deed of gift to a good friend." The 24 gifts that a Jew has to separate. For the Kohanim, 10 gifts are eaten by the Kohanim only in the Azara. Court of the sanctuary, parts of an animal chatas sacrifice, parts of a chatas bird offering, the guilt offering, the pending guilt offering, parts of the communal shlamim sacrifices brought on Shavuot, the remainder of the log of oil, used to purify a leper, the 2 loaves offered on Shavuot, the showbread, the remainder of the flour offerings, the remainder of the Omer offering. 4 gifts are consumed by the Kohanim in the entire city of Yerushalayim. The male firstborn of a kosher domestic animal must be given to the Kohen, who offers up part of it on the Mizbeach and eats its meat, or, if the animal has a defect, keeps it. Of the first fruits, parts of the Todah, thanksgiving offering, and of the ram of the Nazir, the hides of the Korbanos. 10 gifts may be eaten by the Kohanim in any city in Eretz Yisrael, a portion of the crop, the tithe that the Levi separates, for the Kohanim from the tithe which he receives, a portion of dough, the first wool of the shearing, the shoulder, jaws, and stomach of every animal that is slaughtered, even if it is not a sacrifice, the money for the redemption of a firstborn son, the redemption for the firstborn of a donkey, a field consecrated to the Beit HaMikdash and not redeemed by the owner within its allotted time. A field dedicated as a harem, property of the Kohanim. Property stolen from a ger and returned by the thief after the ger had passed away, leaving no heirs. Why did Hashem command children of Israel to support the Kohanim and Levites? By freeing the tribesmen of Levi from the necessity of earning a livelihood, Hashem enabled them to devote themselves fully to Torah and Avodah. The tribe of Levi received no extensive farmland in Eretz Yisrael, as did the rest of the tribes, nor did they participate in warfare or receive spoils. Rather, they were the army of Hashem, the Torah students and teachers, as it says, Bamidbar 18:20. I am your portion and your inheritance, says Hashem. Rambam writes, not only a tribesman of Levi, but any individual whose heart prompts him to serve Hashem and to know him, who thus pursues the straight path intended for man at creation, rather than devising the manifold schemes which people like to plan, becomes holy of holies. Hashem shall be his portion and inheritance forever. He will provide for him an amount sufficient for his sustenance, as he did for the Kohanim and Levites. Rabbi Yonah used to give maaser, a tenth of his profits, to Rabbi Akka bar Ula. The latter was neither a Kohen nor a Levi, but he was a Torah student. Thus King Hizkiyahu commanded the inhabitants of Yerushalayim to give the portion due to the Kohanim and the Levites, in order that they should firmly cling to the Torah of Hashem. Divrei Hayamim 31:4. When the Kohanim consume the sacrifices of children of Israel achieve atonement. This Parsha mentions that each Jew must give maaser, a tenth of his produce, to the Levites. A Levi, too, must separate maaser, a tenth, of the portion which he receives for the Kohanim. The gift of the Levites to the Kohanim is termed terumas maaser, or maaser min hamaaser, a tithe of the tithe. By giving maaser to the Kohen, the Levi acknowledges that the Kohen ranks higher than he does, and he is led to recall that there is one above who ranks higher than both. The mitzvah to redeem a firstborn son. In connection with the gifts of kahuna, the Torah mentions that every firstborn is holy to Hashem. A Jewish father must redeem his firstborn son by giving 5 shekalim to a Kohen. The mitzvah applies as soon as the infant has reached the age of 30 days, when he is considered viable. However, if it was delayed, it must be performed without delay at any later date. This is one of the mitzvot by which we acknowledge that whatever we possess in reality belongs to Hashem. A person's first acquisition is usually the most precious in his eyes. Therefore, we give the first to Hashem to demonstrate that he is the true owner of all that we have. Why did Hashem destroy the Egyptian firstborn in the 10th plague? The firstborn in Egypt were priests of idolatry. A Jewish firstborn, on the other hand, is consecrated to Hashem's service. After the sin of the golden calf, the avodah was transferred to the Kohanim. Therefore, we redeem our firstborn by giving money to the Kohen, who functions in the Beit HaMikdash in the firstborn's stead. 3 crowns were bestowed upon the Jewish people. The crown of royalty, it was given to David and his descendants, forever. The crown of kahuna, it was awarded to Aharon and his sons forever. The crown of Torah, it is accessible to all. If a Jew claims, if only I had descended from royalty or priesthood, I would exert myself to achieve greatness. He is answered, the crown of Torah is available to all. Have you exerted yourself to become a Talmid Chacham? The crown of Torah is the greatest crown of all. Thank you for joining this week's journey through the Midrash. If you enjoyed this story, don't keep it to yourself. Share this channel with someone. Please hit the like, share, and subscribe button for the next story. See you next week on the Midrash Says Out Loud.